Warning! Tube amplifiers have lethal voltages inside them. Please do not attempt to build, test, or repair these without understanding and following all safety protocols. Hey y'all, well, it's time to start doing some of the fab work on this thing. As you can see, I'm already a little further ahead than these videos you're going to see in the next two segments. This is what this little guy's going to look like. As you can see, it's got a nice little compact footprint. It's not real hard to fabricate the chassis up or to do at least the fabrication work on it. And these little Hammond chassis work great. If it's your first build, you might want to use an aluminum one instead of the steel one and then paint it afterwards. But I'm going to show you building it on this steel chassis. I'm going to say up front, do not go buy parts and start building this thing along with me, assuming this amplifier is going to work and sound good. I have no idea. This is a schematic that I found online that I've started from. I showed you in the last video how we're probably going to tweak it a little bit, and then I'm going to build this thing and see what it sounds like. So, fair warning, you guys don't want to jump ahead and go like buy transformers and stuff and start, assembling this thing. It might sound like garbage, and I may end up throwing the chassis and stuff away at the end of this. So, anyway, with that warning in place, let's get busy fabricating. Okay, so let's start doing the fabrication work on this chassis. And we know the power transformer is going to be going over here in this corner. So you don't want this right up next to the edge, but you want it pretty close. Just a couple of millimeters in, away from this rounded edge is perfect. And then for this build, I'm just kind of doing the down and dirty, that marking it like this, just coming in and marking it like that on each hole. Get all four of them like that. And then come in with the drill and drill it with a really small hole like this. So we got these holes drilled. As you can see, just little tiny pilot holes. We'll come back and drill the full-size holes once we get all of the components located. So the next thing we got is this output transformer. It's going to go over here in this corner. So again, we just come in with this automatic center punch and missed that one just a little bit. There we go. I mean, obviously, you could come in and lay all these out with measuring tools and stuff, but I'm just gonna do it what I think is the easy way, is just direct measuring off the device itself that we're installing. Those four look good, so we come in and drill these four holes. We'll double check these little pilot holes. Look like they're in the right spot. And those should work fine. All four holes fit in the slots. Now we want to come in and mount this one. And we're going to put a gap between these. We would rather have these two being closer together and have the bigger gap here. And I always feel comfortable when I have the output transformer about a finger width away from the power transformer. And you notice how this is turned 90 degrees from this. That's really important. So we get that lined up, and we come in here and we mark this one. And again, we know that there's really not a lot of options on where to put these transformers on this chassis, given how small it is. So we're going to get those mounted first, and then we'll look at our options on the other parts that we're going to be installing on this chassis. That one missed a little bit there. And the good thing about this direct marking method is you're visually looking at the things you're installing, and so you know that you're putting the holes in a place that will work. Okay, let's go ahead and drill these holes. And one of the things you can do if you're double checking where you've put these holes is just start the hole and then hold what you're mounting down, and then you can clearly see the hole to make sure you're putting it in the right place. Just like that. Now, if we look at the bottom of these transformers, the hole the wire comes through is going to be inset just a little bit from where the mounting hole is. Hold something that's a straight edge, like you'd be putting the mounting holes kind of like that, and then the hole going through is going to be about right there. And you want it centered between these two holes. So it probably is a good idea to measure this one and make sure we're putting it in the right place. And this kind of caliper will probably work better for marking this. So come in here and measure like that. And like that. Put a little mark there. And we can see that's pretty much centered. So we'll come in here and mark all 4 of these wire holes. And we want to make sure that we put these back ones in far enough where the grommet can fit in here. Because you put it right up there next to the edge like that. That's one of the reasons we're insetting it in just a little bit. Probably about 3 millimeters would be just right. 3 to 4 millimeters. That one could go in a little further, so we'll put that one about right there. About right there. There. And there. Go ahead and drill the pilot holes for these wire holes. And then we need to drill the wire holes for the power transformer. And if we look at it, the wire holes can be pretty much even with the bolt holes. So we'll come in here and find the approximate center. Again, these don't have to be perfection on these wire holes. Just need to be fairly close to the center. That looks good. Come in here and mark both of these. There we go. Here's the layout for all of our transformers. Now, the next thing I want to do is think about the controls on the front. And we're going to have this angel eye switch. I don't want it too close to the edge. And I just kind of eyeball these where I think they look good. I think that'll look good right about there. So we want it perfectly centered. So that's 2 inches or 52 millimeters. So come in here to 1 inch and mark that like that. And let's see how far this over this is. It's about 1.1 inches over, or 28 millimeters. So it's a little over from the edge from what the halfway distance would be, which I think will look good. So let's mark that. Drill that hole. And I like going ahead and drilling all of these pilot holes right out of the gate so that we know where everything's going to be and then come back and punch the big holes. So the next thing, I think I'm going to use this little flat-sided round knob like this. I think that'll look good. It's kind of squared off and small enough to look good on this chassis. And let's see what it looks like if we put it the same distance that one is. Like that. I don't know, that looks a little close to the edge to me. Let me move it over here so we don't have the lens distortion. I think I want to move it over about like that. Visually that looks better to me. So let's see what we've got there. It's only a couple of millimeters over. We'll put the hole right there. So here we go. We got this hole done. So we've got the 2 holes on the front of the chassis drilled. Now we've got to do the RCA jacks that are going to be in the side. So we want to make sure we got these far enough back where there's room for the wiring. So let me look at what I did on my previous little spud amp, and we'll probably put them in the exact same place. So we put the last ones 40 millimeters from the front edge. And so we'll make a tentative little mark there and there. We're going to mount them vertically. And then we had them a 1/2 inch from the edge. We'll put one there and one right there. And that gives us plenty of space between them and far enough away from this edge where they're not going to be, you know, getting into this rounded part of the chassis. Let me double check that this second one is exactly vertical of the first one. It needs to go right there. And let me drill these 2 holes. So it's important that we get all of our external things put where we think we're going to want them, so that then when we come inside the amp, we know where everything's going to be, and that allows us to, like, okay, now we can put the tag strips, or like, we've got this big choke, which is much bigger than on our other little spud amp, and we've got to find a space for it. And it will just barely mount either vertically, or it can be mounted that direction. And we'll figure out which way is best when we start, you know, figuring out where we're going to lay out all the components. So the next thing we need to do is we've got the IC connector, which I'm sure I'm going to center over the transformer and probably put it down here low, so it's away from this wiring and gives us some room to work. And then we have our speaker jacks, and I like using these big fat speaker jacks like these. And so we got 4 of these we need to mount across the back. And let me go measure the spacing, because one thing I do on all my amps that are for me personally is they have the same spacing between the positive and the negative, so that the cable setup that I use for my speakers is interchangeable between all of them easily. So let's make sure that we're drilling them in the right place and not doing them backwards. So Market Blue Glow did that and basically ruined a chassis, and I've actually done it myself. When I'm on camera, sometimes it's easy to get talking and worrying about keeping stuff on camera and not paying attention to what you're doing. So these are the output transformers. So the speaker jacks are going to be over here, and we're going to start over here in this corner, and we're going to come far enough in. See, this is where, I don't know if you can see real well, if you look in here, the metal overlaps right here, and we don't want to get into this overlap. And so, but I want them as far over this way as I can get them to give us some room back here in case we do decide to, like, maybe mount the choke back here. So I'm going to come over 20 millimeters, and we're going to come back, and actually I'm going to go ahead and set this on 1 inch so I can mark the center line of this too. So then I can just switch back and forth between these two tools while I'm marking this. So there's that one. I'm going to go ahead and drill this starting hole here. And that's where our first speaker jack's going to be. And then they're 30 millimeters apart. So we'll mark 30, do our vertical alignment. Mark that one. Go ahead and drill it. And by doing it like this, we'll have the speaker jacks all kind of over on this side. And then if we do, there may be enough room to mount this choke on the back between the power transformer and that first output transformer on the underside. But if nothing else, it gives us some room for tag strips and other stuff while ensuring that the speaker jacks are far enough apart where you'll be able to easily connect the wires and get your fingers in there to do the thumb screws to tighten down. If you do use like the loose wire kind of speaker cables, and those are marked. Just like that. And there's our 4 speaker jacks. So the last thing we need to install is this IC connector. I'm going to go ahead off camera, draw these holes to the right size for the components, and get all of that fab work done. And there's not going to be anything on this end, but again, we may end up mounting the choke on this end. We'll figure that out once I get all these other components installed. So let me get these drilled out, and then we'll kind of look at the layout and see how we need to mount the rest of these components and tag strips. Well, I got all the holes drilled, and we've got the power switch. We got our Alps volume pot's going to be there. We got our 2 RCA jacks vertically here on the side. We got our speaker jacks across the back. Our IEC connector. Oh, and let me show you something on that. This is one of my least favorite things to fabricate on these chassis, is cutting this thing out. And I've tried different techniques. I tried one time using like a Dremel tool little cutoff wheel, and it like slipped and went across the chassis. And then I tried drilling holes in the corners, then filing at the middle. But what I found is the easiest is I just got your basic little coping saw, and I wish somebody made a metal cutting blade, but I couldn't find one. So this is just the finest tooth like wood blade, but they seem to hold up pretty well, and even with this steel chassis it cuts through it fairly easily. So I drill a hole in one corner after I lay it out, and then just go around and cut it out, and then come back with a file and finalize the shape, get it to fit through, and then drill the 2 holes. And that's about the easiest way I found to do it. This metal is really too hard to use one of those little nipper tools. I've tried those, but I broke the blades, or they were cut really rough around the edge. I'm sure they probably work fine on aluminum, and it might be another reason if you're doing this as your first project to maybe do an aluminum chassis. And then unfortunately, I did screw up here. I drilled one of the mounting holes the size of a grommet hole. And I was drilling these. I drilled this. For some reason, I jumped up here and drilled that one as a grommet hole. And then these are the grommet holes for the power transformer. But luckily, when I come up here and set the transformer down and line up the other 3 holes, that big hole's covered up. And so let me zoom in here and show you what, as you can see, it covers that hole up. so it's not a problem. I mean, I will have to put a washer on the inside, which isn't ideal, but at the end of the day, it's really not a big deal at all. And so, anyway, just be careful when you're drilling these out to make sure, because there's so many holes here, it's easy to get confused, especially if you're just going like drill, 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 and then you go, oh, crap. So, anyway, this thing's all ready to start mounting stuff up. And I was going to drill the tube socket holes, but I decided to wait. I want to see how all the parts lay out on the inside, and like where that big choke's going to go, and where the tag strips are going to end up being. I got some choices here on the filtering caps. I can either use these radial type, and I've got, you know, these three like this, or I've got a set of axial ones that are the same values. And so I want to see which one of these lays out the nicest, and, you know, try to figure out where I'm going to put all of those. I am putting an extra stage of filtering, mainly because I need to knock down the B plus a little bit, but it's not going to hurt anything to reduce the ripple, especially since this is a higher amplification amplifier. I don't want to have it amplifying the DC ripple, so got to figure that stuff out. So I'm going to get the transformers mounted and figure out how I'm going to, you know, lay some of this stuff out. The other thing that I was going to show you too that I've been doing is I'm not going to be using all of these leads. And in the past, like if I wasn't using these 5-volt heaters, I would just heat shrink off the ends of them inside the amplifier and just leave them inside the amp. Well, I started thinking about it. It's like, why am I even pulling these inside the amplifier, especially in a chassis where things are already really tight? And so, not going to be using this gray wire. This is the 115, and I'm not going to be using these two 5-volt ones either. So what I'm going to do is take the end bells off of this, and I'm going to fold it back up like that inside the end bell, heat shrink them, and just leave these wires inside the end bells and not even pull them into the amplifier. So then I'll only have these two heater wires on one end, and then on this end I'll have the 125 volt power leads and then the high voltage secondary. And in case you've never worked with one of these transformers, here's your neutral. This is a 125 and this is a 115. These are all primary windings. They warn you, never connect both of these or it just burns the transformer up instantly. So you want to pick the one that's closest to the voltage that you're actually using. And for me, I have like 122, 121, 122 volts on my outlets, so I'm going to be using these 125 taps. In this 115 one, I'm just going to, like on the other side, I'm just going to heat shrink the end of it, fold it back up inside the transformer, and go like that with it. I'm also going to paint these screws black while I have it apart, and these little white washers. I hate the way they look a different color. I think they look a lot better. And then I pull this tag off and then use some contact cement and glue this tag on the inside of the chassis, so in the future I'll know which wires are what and the rating of the transformer and all that stuff if I'm ever wondering what the transformer is. So let me get busy on that stuff, get all these transformers bolted down, and I think we'll be heading in a good place where I can start maybe gathering the parts, seeing what I've got, what I need, make a small parts order, and try to get this thing put together. Well, that's it for this segment. Hope you've enjoyed watching me work on this thing. It's probably going to be another video or two on fabrication kind of work before we start wiring up everything. I'm trying to do it fairly step by step without just boring people with drilling every hole. So again, I hope this is step by step enough for you to follow along without being too long-winded. So anyway, hope you're enjoying this content. If you are, please subscribe to the channel. Please like the video. And again, I hope this is as much fun for you guys as it is for me. Until next time, Have a nice day.